Indeed, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Today's video will bring you into the world of the most deadly women you've never heard of. These weren't just angry women. They were calculated, cold, and in some cases, unstoppable. Brace yourself, because these stories will change the way you see everything. Amelia Dyer. Country, London. Date of execution, June 10th, 1896. People popularly called her the Ogress of Reading. Dyer was an English serial killer who murdered babies in her care for over 30 years during the Victorian era. She trained as a nurse and lost her husband in 1869. To earn money, Dyer began baby farming. This meant taking in unwanted infants in exchange for a fee. At first, she cared for the children properly. She also had 2 children of her own. However, several infants died while in her care. Authorities convicted her of neglect and sentenced her to 6 months of hard labor. After her release, she began killing the babies she took in. She strangled at least some of them and hid the bodies to avoid getting caught. She suffered from mental illness and spent time in several asylums, although many people believed she was pretending. She also survived at least 1 serious suicide attempt. Her crimes came to light when someone found a baby's body in a bag in the River Thames. Evidence linked the body to her. Police arrested her on April 4, 1896. In one of the most famous trials of the Victorian era, the court found her guilty of killing baby Doris Marman. Authorities hanged her on June 10, 1896. At the time of her death, people blamed Dyer for a few murders, but most believed she had killed many more, about 400 or even more. This made her one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Betty Butler. Country, United States. Date of execution, June 11, 1954. A court found Betty Butler guilty of murdering Evelyn Clark. Butler had been living with Evelyn along with her 2 children. Clark had offered to pay Butler and her children to live with her in exchange for an offer Butler accepted as she was destitute. The 2 women often fought. Their arguments were serious and sometimes violent. On September 6, 1952, Betty Butler murdered Evelyn Clark while they were fishing in Sharon Woods. They argued. When they returned to shore, several witnesses saw Butler attack and drown Evelyn. Butler said she was defending herself against Evelyn's unwanted advances. Another witness said Butler was bisexual and killed Evelyn in anger because Evelyn showed attention to another woman. On June 11, 1954, Butler was executed by electrocution. Aileen Wormos. Country, United States. Date of execution, October 9, 2002. Wormos worked as a street prostitute along the highways of Florida. While working, she robbed and shot 7 of her male clients. All 7 men died between 1989 and 1990. She admitted she committed the murders but said she acted in self-defense. Wormos killed her first victim, Richard Charles Mallory, on November 30, 1989. She said Mallory drove her to an abandoned area for but when they go there, he beat and had non-virginal intercourse with her. She killed him in return. A deputy sheriff from Volusia County found Mallory's abandoned car 2 days after the murder. On December 13th of that year, they found his body miles away in a forest. The cause of death was 2 bullets to his left lung. David Andrew Spears was Wormos's second victim. Authorities declared him missing on May 19, 1990. They found his body along US 19 in Citrus County on June 1, 1990. He had been shot 6 times with a .22 pistol. Charles Edmund Carr-Skadden was Wormos's third victim. Authorities found his body in Pasco County on June 6, 1990. He had been shot 9 times with a .22 pistol. Peter Abraham Seams was Wormos's fourth victim. He left Florida for Arkansas in June 1990. On July 4, 1990, authorities found his car in Orange Springs, Florida. Warnos and her accomplice Tyria Moore were seen abandoning the car. They also found Tyria Moore's fingerprint on the interior door handle. Unfortunately, they never found his body. Troy Eugene Burris was Warnos's fifth victim. Authorities reported him missing on July 31, 1990. They found his body along State Road 19 in Marion County on August 4, 1990. Forensic reports showed that he had been shot twice. Charles Richard Humphreys was Warnos's sixth victim. The body was found on September 12, 1990 in Marion County. Unlike the others, he was fully dressed. He had also been shot 7 times in the head and torso. Walter Gino Antonio was Warnos's final victim. They found his naked body near a remote logging road in Dixie County on November 19, 1990. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, the police found his car in Brevard County. On January 16, 1991, Warnos confessed to murdering her victims. On January 14, 1992, she went to trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory. Even though past crimes usually aren't allowed as evidence in court, Florida's Williams rule made an exception. It allowed the prosecutors to show details of her other crimes, proving she had a pattern of breaking the law. On March 31, 1992, Warnos pleaded no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears. She said she wanted to get right with God. In her statement to the court, she said, in part, "I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently me as I've told you, but these others did not. They only began to start to." On May 15, 1992, Warnos received 3 more death sentences. In June of the same year, she pleaded guilty to the murder of Charles Edmund Carskadden. In November of that year, she got her 5th death sentence. In February 1993, Warnos pleaded guilty to the murder of Walter Gino Antonio and was sentenced to death again. It is not stated whether Antonio was one of her male clients, but he was one of her victims. No charges came against her for the murder of Peter Abraham Seams because his body was never found. So Warnos received 6 death sentences in total. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Julia Fazekas and the Angel Makers of Nagirev. Country, Hungary. Date of execution, unspecified. The Angel Makers of Nagirev were a group of 26 women and 2 men from villages in the Tisantul region of Hungary. They reportedly poisoned between 45 and 50 confirmed victims and possibly 300 more between 1911 and 1929. Zuzana Fazekas was a middle-aged midwife who came to Nagirev in 1911. Her husband had long gone missing without explanation. Between 1911 and 1921, the police imprisoned her 10 times for performing illegal abortions. However, judges always acquitted her. During World War I, able-bodied men went to fight for Austria-Hungary. While they were away, their wives had 1 or more foreign lovers. When the men returned, many forgave their wives and returned to their old lives. This situation caused tension. At that time, Fazekas started secretly convincing women who wanted to escape their problems to poison their husbands. She taught them to make arsenic by boiling flypaper and collecting the deadly residue. After killing their husbands, some women poisoned their parents, either because they saw them as burdensome or to get their inheritance. Others poisoned their lovers, and some even poisoned their sons. The midwife reportedly asked the poisoners, "Why put up with them?" The first poisoning in Nagirev happened in 1911, but Fazekas did not do it. Soon after, more husbands, children, and family members died from poison. Poisoning became popular, and by the mid-1920s, Nagirev earned the nickname the Murder District. People estimate that between 45 and 50 murders happened during the 18 years Fazekas lived there. She was the closest thing to a doctor in the village. and her cousin was the clerk who filed all the death certificates, which let the murders stay hidden. 3 different stories explain how the angel makers were finally caught. In one story, Sabo, one of the angel makers, was apprehended by 2 visitors who survived her poisoning attempts. She blamed a woman named Bukenovsky, who then pointed to Fazekas. In another story, a medical student in a nearby town found high levels of arsenic in a body that washed up on the riverbank, which led to an investigation. However, Bela Bodo, a Hungarian-American historian who wrote the first detailed book on the topic, said the murders became public in 1929. That happened after an anonymous letter accused women from the Tisazug region of poisoning their family members. Authorities dug up dozens of bodies from the local cemetery. 28 suspects went to trial, all but 2 were women. They were found guilty of 162 murders. The case had 12 trials between 1929 and 1931. No exact number of victims is known, but some sources say around 300. The authorities tried the cases separately to avoid too much publicity. The trials ended with 6 death sentences. 3 people were hanged. 1 sentence was changed to a lighter punishment. 1 person was acquitted, and 2 got life in prison. 8 others received life imprisonment, and 2 had shorter prison terms. Brittany Holberg, country, United States. Date of execution, unspecified. Holberg killed A.B. Towery on November 13, 1996, after a fight. She said Towery had paid her for several years. On the day of the killing, Holberg testified that Towery hit her with a frying pan after he caught her smoking drugs in his apartment. She said they struggled for several minutes. When he pulled out strands of her hair, she said she lost it and stabbed him several times before shoving a brass pole down his throat. Prosecutors said Holberg killed Towery to steal his money and prescription drugs, which made the crime a capital offense. As evidence, they pointed to Towery's wallet, which lay open at the scene, and the statements of 2 witnesses who saw her counting money after the killing. After Holberg killed Towery, she fled to Tennessee. Police arrested her in Memphis in February 1997 and sent her back to Texas. At the trial, Vicky Kirkpatrick, a confidential informant for the Amarillo Police Department, said that Holberg told her she had killed Towery to steal from him. Kirkpatrick said Holberg called the killing fun and amazing. In 2011, Kirkpatrick took back her statement and said prosecutors had forced her to testify by threatening her with a burglary charge. A jury found Holberg guilty of murder during a robbery and sentenced her to death. One of Towery's sons later said he had brought a gun into the courtroom to kill Holberg, but changed his mind at the last moment. On Friday, March 27, 1998, a jury convicted Holberg of robbing, torturing, and murdering A.B. Towery Sr. in his southwest Amarillo home. Holberg said she acted in self-defense. In 2025, a federal court overturned her conviction after finding that someone had withheld evidence during her original trial. However, Holberg remains on death row in Texas. Chelsea Richardson, country, United States. Date of execution, unspecified. Rick and Susanna Walmsley, a wealthy couple from Mansfield, Texas, were shot and stabbed to death in their home. The culprit was Andrew Walmsley's friend, Susanna Toledano. Andrew Walmsley, his girlfriend Chelsea Richardson, and their friend Toledano planned the murders to take the Walmsleys' $1.65 million estate. They also wanted to kill Andrew's older sister, Sarah, but she was not home that night. Andrew Walmsley was the second child of Rick and Susanna Walmsley. He began dating Chelsea Richardson in January 2003. However, his parents disapproved of the relationship. In October 2003, Andrew and Chelsea started planning to kill Andrew's parents. At the time of the murders, Chelsea lived with Susana Toledano as her roommate. On the night of December 11, 2003, Susana Toledano shot and stabbed Rick and Susanna Walmsley. Reports say her co-defendants forced her to do it. On November 9, 2003, she had also been made to shoot at the gas tank of the Walmsley's Jeep Laredo in a failed murder attempt. The murder weapon belonged to Hilario Cardenas. Cardenas managed an IHOP restaurant in Arlington, Texas. He knew what the three intended to use the gun for, but did nothing about it. To avoid the death penalty, Susana pleaded guilty to murder in January 2005. As part of her plea deal, she agreed to testify for the state. On May 26, 2006, the court sentenced her to life in prison with the chance of parole after 30 years. She later testified against Chelsea and Andrew during their trials. On March 5, 2006, a jury convicted Andrew Walmsley of capital murder. The jurors did not see Andrew as a future danger to society, so they sentenced him to life in prison. Andrew is serving his sentence at the John B. Connolly Unit in Kennedy, Texas. Unless he wins an appeal, Andrew can apply for parole in 2044. Hilario Cardenas pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder. On May 26, 2006, the court sentenced him to 50 years in prison with parole eligibility in 2014. Cardenas was denied parole in June 2016 and again in June 2017. Chelsea Richardson's trial began in May 2005. Other inmates testified that Chelsea admitted her role in the murders. Susana also said Chelsea told her to kill the Walmsleys so they could share the family's estate. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Chelsea guilty of capital murder. They took just over 2 hours to decide on a death sentence by lethal injection. The jury said the crime was brutal and planned, and that Chelsea was a danger to society. She became the first woman in Tarrant County, Texas, to receive a death sentence. However, on December 13, 2011, Chelsea's sentence was commuted to life in prison. Taylor Renee Parker, country, United States. Date of execution, unspecified. Parker was convicted of capital murder for killing a pregnant woman to steal her unborn baby. A jury in Bowie County, located in Northeast Texas, deliberated for about 1 hour before finding Taylor Renee Parker guilty of the October 2020 murder of Reagan Michelle Simmons Hancock and the abduction of the victim's daughter. Parker had pretended to be pregnant for months. She also held a gender reveal party and went to great lengths to convince her former boyfriend that she was having their daughter. On the morning of October 9, 2020, she attacked Hancock with a hammer and used a scalpel to remove her baby from her womb. Defense attorney Jeff Harrelson said Parker was mentally ill. Shortly after the attack, police caught Parker speeding. She told the officer she had given birth by the side of the road, and the baby was not breathing. The station reported that Parker was taken to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma, where doctors pronounced the baby dead. Investigators testified that on the day of the killing, Parker watched many videos about delivering and caring for babies. One video showed the physical exam of a baby born at 35 weeks. The jury saw grisly crime scene photos, including one of the family kitchen. On the side of the refrigerator were 3D sonogram photos of the baby the couple was expecting, with large smears of blood below them. During the punishment phase, jurors heard from inmates who had been housed with Parker in the Bowie County Jail. They testified that Parker attempted to involve them in creating a defense that blamed someone else for the crime. Parker's attorneys argued that the baby was never alive. They asked to dismiss the kidnapping charge, which would lower the capital murder charge to murder. That's why in opening statements we spent so much time on definitions. You can't kidnap a person who has not been born alive, said Jeff Harrelson in his final argument to the jury. However, Prosecutors said several medical professionals testified that the infant had a heartbeat when born. Prosecutor Lauren Richards described all the lies Parker told different people, including the fake pregnancy before the killing. In the past 2 weeks, the evidence has never been clearer. Assistant District Attorney Lauren Richards told the jury, "She's a liar, a manipulator, and now she's going to be held accountable for it." She reminded the jury that Reagan was beaten in the head at least 5 times with enough force to compress her skull into her brain. The pain Reagan must have felt when Taylor started cutting her abdomen, hip to hip, indescribable, Richards said. When Taylor had the baby and Reagan was still alive, that's when Taylor started slashing and cutting. She couldn't leave her alive. It was not a quick death. She just kept cutting her. I guess Reagan did not die fast enough for Taylor to get out of there and continue with her plans. During the trial, a state police investigator testified that Parker had done intensive research on how to fake a pregnancy convincingly. Less than 2 hours after deliberations, Parker was handed a death verdict. After the trial, Parker was on her way to the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, where Texas holds its female death row inmates. Kimberly Cargill, country, United States. Date of execution, unspecified. In 2010, Kimberly Cargill murdered her son's mentally challenged babysitter in White House, Texas. At that time, Child Protective Services, CPS, was investigating Cargill for child abuse. In March 2010, CPS removed Cargill's 2 younger sons, Luke and Zach, from her custody and placed them with relatives. On May 18, 2010, Cargill failed to follow a voluntary agreement that gave temporary custody of Luke to her mother. She did not return her son to her mother after picking him up from daycare. Cargill also faced a custody hearing on June 23, 2010. On June 18, 2010, Sherry Walker, the mentally challenged babysitter, was served a subpoena to testify at the custody hearing. Cargill feared that Walker's testimony could lead to the loss of custody of her son, so she stopped Walker from testifying. On the day Walker received the subpoena, Cargill met with her. Cargill wanted to hide her so that she wouldn't testify. Cargill invited Walker out for dinner. However, she killed Walker by an unknown method, causing her death by asphyxiation. After the murder, Cargill abandoned Walker's body on a rural road, 8 to 10 miles from Walker's apartment. Cargill poured lighter fluid on Walker's clothes and set them on fire, burning her body before leaving the scene. The next day, someone found Walker's body by the road. It took 4 days to identify her. Later that same month, police investigations identified Cargill as the prime suspect. She was arrested and held in Smith County Jail. Initially, she was charged with causing felony injury to a child. On July 31, 2010, Cargill was formally charged with capital murder. In October 2010, a Smith County grand jury formally indicted Kimberly Cargill on a charge of capital murder. In August 2011, the court set a trial date for Cargill. Her trial was scheduled to start on February 13, 2012. The prosecution announced that they would seek the death penalty. Cargill's trial began on May 8, 2012, in front of a Smith County jury. Cargill pleaded not guilty to the charges. In her defense, Cargill claimed she was innocent and did not kill Walker. She testified that on the day of the murder, Walker had a seizure and stopped breathing while they were driving near a hospital. Cargill said she missed the turn and was unable to reach the hospital. She claimed she tried to give Walker CPR, but her efforts failed. In a panic, Cargill said she decided to dispose of Walker's body by setting it on fire. On May 18, 2012, the jury found Cargill guilty of capital murder. On May 31, 2012, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. On June 7, 2012, Judge Jack Skeen of Smith County formally sentenced Cargill to death by lethal injection. Masumi Hayashi, country, Japan. Date of execution, unspecified. Masumi Hayashi is a Japanese mass murderer. She was convicted of poisoning a pot of curry served at a summer festival in 1998 in the Sonobe district of Wakayama, Japan. On July 25, 1998, someone poisoned a communal pot of curry being served to residents in the Sonobe district of Wakayama. The curry contained at least 130 grams of arsenic, enough to kill more than 100 people. 2 children and 2 adults died after eating the curry. 63 others suffered from acute arsenic poisoning. The victims who died were Takatoshi Taninaka, Takaki Tanaka, the council president and vice president of Wakayama, Hirotaka Hayashi, and Miyuki Tori. Police quickly focused on Masumi Hayashi, a mother of 4. A witness had seen her near the curry pot, and she had easy access to arsenic through her husband's insect extermination business. Before the incident, Hayashi worked as an insurance saleswoman. After her arrest, authorities charged her and her husband with several counts of insurance fraud. Hayashi was also tried for 3 earlier poisoning attempts that happened over the previous 10 years. Investigators stated that she was motivated by the prospect of receiving life insurance money. She is also believed to have tried to kill her husband at least once. Prosecutors said her motive for poisoning the curry was anger toward neighbors who had shunned her family. The arsenic found in the curry matched the arsenic kept at her home. At her trial, Masumi Hayashi pleaded not guilty. In 2002, the Wakayama District Court sentenced her to death. On June 28, 2005, the Osaka High Court upheld the death sentence. However, her lawyers, including Yoshihiro Yasuda, argued she was innocent because the case relied only on circumstantial evidence. On April 21, 2009, the Supreme Court of Japan rejected her final appeal. Cynthia Kaufman, country, United States. Date of execution, unspecified. Authorities accused Kaufman and Marlowe of kidnapping and killing 4 women in October and November of 1986. On October 11th, Sandra Neary disappeared from Costa Mesa, California. On October 28th, Pamela Simmons vanished from Bullhead City, Arizona. On November 7th, Corinna Novis went missing from Redlands, California. On November 12th, Lynell Murray disappeared from Huntington Beach, California. Police arrested Kaufman and Marlowe on November 14, 1986. After the arrest, Kaufman confessed to the murders. Her lawyers said she loved Marlowe, but did not leave him because he beat her, brainwashed her, and starved her during their crime spree. However, the court sentenced her to death. Authorities put Kaufman and Marlowe on trial in July 1989. In 1990, the court sentenced both of them to death. Kaufman became the first woman in California to receive a death sentence since the state reinstated the death penalty in 1977. In a separate trial in 1992, the court convicted Kaufman of another murder. She received a life sentence in prison for that crime. Kaufman is currently on death row at the Central California Women's Facility. If you enjoy the way we create videos and would like us to bring more cases like this to light, please hit the like button and subscribe for more in-depth dives.